Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith. Podcast episode 152. I think when we're done, some of you are going to think this should have been number one. We're going to talk to Jim Rogers, the one and only Canadian, good Canadian boy. He's from Winnipeg, Manitoba, true Canadian, loves hockey, loves beer, loves tennis, loves beer, loves golf, loves beer. Like myself, he started late in tennis. We'll go through that. Transferred his energy from hockey to tennis. The golf will be interesting to talk about for sure. His daughter, he raised a Division I athlete. That'll be something we can touch upon. Spent a lot of time, tons and tons of time, years and years in Europe with both ice hockey and tennis. He was one of my students, Tyler Junior College, Tennis Tech. This is what we're going to call the road runner. The Canadian is very polite, but all Canadians speak two languages, English and profanity. So what we're going to call it the road runner podcast, it's going to be edited. It's going to be beep, 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 beep. So Ivan Ozaretz, he's going to have some work ahead of him with this one. But let's see if we get Jimmy on the phone. Calling Vancouver, British Columbia.
There you go.
Jim Rogers, thank you for being a guest on the GreatBase Tennis Podcast.
Well, it's about time that you got some real guests on here.
Yeah,
so,
I just said I've been
monitoring the situation, and at least you're taking a step up to the big leagues now.
There you go. I told people this is 152, and it should have been one. With Winnipeg, home of Winnie the Pooh. Actually, Winnie the Pooh comes from was a writer in London, but there was someone who he had the bear, and I guess the pet bear was from Ontario, but the Canadian he named him after his grandfather, whatever. So Winnie, but the name originates, or it goes back to Winnipeg. Winnie the Pooh. But tell us about your starts in sport. Jimmy was a goalie, right?
Yeah, I've taken a long and winding road. When I was a kid, I was a goalie, and in Winnipeg at the time in the 70s, it was a big thing, and I was the big goalie on a big team until I wasn't. Even today when I'm talking with a lot of players in different sports, everyone thinks that getting to where you want to go is very linear, but it's a long and bumpy road full of adjustment and changes, and that's sort of what I've been able to do. So. Well,
yeah, we'll get into it now. You're working in professional hockey, but you ended up on my doorstep. You were the backup goalie to Belfour, who I think, our fact checker, won the NCAAs, won Olympic gold in the Stanley Cup. But you got the point.
Yeah,
go ahead.
He did a lot of things very well. So it's a funny story. Like I was a goalie and I was pretty good, and then I started to be bad. And so the organization I was with, they bring in this other goalie. I remember vividly. I'm just sitting in the dressing room. This guy walks in. I was small. He was small. And he says, I'm taking your job. And I go, sure you are. And basically, he did. And I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. It was a train coming at me, and it was actually Eddie Belfour, and ran me out of town and ran me out of the profession as a goalie. So Eddie Belfour, we call him Eddie. I can't say that, but we call him Eddie, and it reminds with some other bad words.
So we can use some bad words.
Great goalie. He won the Stanley Cup. He's in the Hall of Fame. I mean, it was a good decision on our management part.
But the fact that you're a true Canadian, I know a lot of paper Canadians, but you're a true Canadian. So I mentioned on the intro that all Canadians speak English and profanity, and this is going to be the Roadrunner. So if there's a few beep beeps, that's okay. You remember the cartoon, the Roadrunner, beep beep?
There you go. There you go.
Listeners, Jimmy is 58. I call him Jimmy for Jimmy Connors and Jimbo Connors. Well, tennis.
Yeah.
You obviously
trilingual. I was going to say I'm trilingual. I'm English, German, and profanity. So I'm one step ahead of everyone else in the game.
Well, worldly guy. You still speak German at home. You married a German gal, right? Yeah. My wife Britta, she put up with me for now 33 years. I've been married, and we met in Germany where I was living, and she knew what she was getting into. I was playing hockey and coaching tennis, and very sport atmosphere, and she's still hanging in there with me today. And we only talk German. Every once in a while when my daughter's over, it goes all over the place. It goes back and forth between English and German, but when I talk to my wife, it's always German. So Sir Rogers went to Germany because there was a tennis boom. Becker and Graf were so good. There were so many jobs, very wealthy country. But let's go back even further. Your connection to tennis and how you got to Tyler, Texas, of all places. Well,
Tyler, Texas. This seems so long ago, and the older we get, the less I remember. But no, it was, my hockey career at that point when I was 17 or 18 was a dead end. I had, I wouldn't even call them offers. I had guys sent me a letter to go play hockey at the University of Auburn or someplace in California. And my father looked at that and said, you're not going there. They don't play hockey in the South. So this is like 1980, 81 or whatever. And, I was playing tennis in Winnipeg with some friends, and I wouldn't even say I was good amongst them, I would win some stuff, but I wasn't winning tournaments or anything. And I stumbled upon an ad in the tennis magazine about Tyler, Texas, and Steve Smith. And, then I just, sent a letter or whatever I did. I can't even remember that. But it came down to I really wanted to do it. My dad, to this day, still had never seen me play tennis. And he just asked me, can I play tennis? I go, yeah, I think I can or whatever. And I know he set up a meeting with your brother Mike, who was working with the Jets at the time. And I guess they had a meeting, and your brother said, yeah, send it to my brother, and he, he'll be just fine. And so my dad said, okay. I paid $99, got on a bus from Winnipeg, took a 35-hour bus ride down to Tyler, Texas, and yeah, it was hot. I remember that, getting off the bus, it was really hot,
For our listeners, that was back, no internet. It was just a classified ad in the back of Tennis Magazine.
Yeah.
And then when Jim mentions the Jets, that's the NHL hockey team, the Winnipeg Jets, and my brother was he was with them there for 14 or 15 years. He had several positions. The highest one was GM, but he was a scout. I coached a minor league team but I remember, you got along with everybody, but some of your friends obviously were very experienced players and you were not. And I just remember how years later, so say you showed up and you're a little bit before the age of 20, and then now all of a sudden you and your peers are 35 and you surpassed some of them because you basically had no bad mileage in comparison to them. You hadn't played tennis like they have played.
You put it very nicely. I was the worst, and I remember going up on the hills. It was first day or second day I was there or whatever. And I'm on the court, and I'll never forget it. I'm on the court with Mike Custer, Cliff Menke, and a Texan guy named Stan. I can't remember Stan's last name. We call him Stan the Man. And the only time I touched the ball was when I had to serve. It was embarrassing. I was so bad. Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, I was a 0. And, so it got my attention. And, I think what I did very well was I was very coachable because I had nothing, so, and I wanted to be a player or be a coach or whatever. And, I remember going down to the court, and the first year, I don't think I played. I didn't play a set. I was drop hitting against the fence, doing ball machine, doing everything, just to be able to hit the ball. And, not that I'm a good player or anything now, but, my claim to fame is going from a 0 to 10 in Tyler, Texas, and playing club tennis in Germany, and then even here in I got an ITF ranking, and I ended up being in men's 40s, number 70 in the world in men's ITF ranking. So, it was a long process. It basically took me 35 years to figure out how to play the game.
Well, Mike Custer, I've talked to him quite often in recent times, and I know he listens to the podcast. Cliff Minky, they were excellent tennis players. So they played doubles really well together.
I remember Mike Custer talking to me about pronation on the serve, of turning the arm, and lowering the toss, getting out in front. But it was kind of difficult. I was like 5'11" if I stood straight, and he was 6'5" or 6'4" or whatever. So I'm just he was a help. I remember him really helping me on my serve. I really do.
TV show Archie Griffith, Opie, Andy Griffith Show, Ron Howard, Eric Oberhammer. I remember the two of you coming to visit me without telling me you're showing up, and I walk into the tennis facility and I see these two players on a distant court and go, those guys can play. I get a little bit closer, those guys can really play. And it was you and Eric, and Eric was just dumbfounded that you were taking sets from him, and because way back when, I remember that you were on the technical courts and just had to start crawl your way to the top. Like yourself, I was told, I got into tennis with the idea, okay, I'm going to learn how to play so, I can be a tennis coach. I didn't fall into tennis coaching by default. I actually had a plan at the outset was to become a tennis coach, but I was told I had to learn to play. Eric is the person who put us on social media. For our listeners, great guy. The late Eric Oberhammer fell victim to leukemia and bedridden. He started our Facebook page, and he was putting up content. And he did that for, not much longer than a month. But what comes to your mind when you think of Eric?
Well, Eric is it's like you can't talk about Eric as if he's passed away or not. It always seems that Eric is still around, or Opie is still around. I never called him Eric, but Ope and I, we grew up together. We both were there as 19 or 20-year-olds, and until his last week of his life. The thing I liked about it is once he came over to Germany, and he was working with me together, or working for me, however you want to formulate it, whatever. But I would just beat out of him on the court and on the red clay, and I loved it, and he hated it. But it was like my greatest wins of my life are against Opie. Just because he knew how bad I was, and he knew how good he was, and so the red clay helped me, and what would we say, load a high and swallow through, or whatever. So Eric and I, we had a lot of fun together. Eric's he was a great coach, great personality. When he came over to Germany, he blended in with the people that have been around me for a long time. And to this day, I've got friends in Germany who are now, over 70, 75 years of age who took lessons with Eric, and they'll never forget Eric. Eric was, he was a one of a kind, we always talked about, would you ever coach tennis for no money? And 99.9% of us wouldn't do it. Eric would. Eric he would coach he just loved coaching, so he loved the game.
Eric used to introduce himself. I'm Eric Oberhammer. I'm a 3-5 world-class lady doubles coach. He was definitely a Pied Piper, get the people to laugh. He did such a great job teaching kids with Down syndrome. I mean, he had them hitting balls and having fun. And when he was in the final stages, not too far from his death, I took him to the PTR. I said, all right, Oberhammer, you'll be my guest. And I took him to the PTR convention. We went up to Hilton Head. And then we did another version of that because we went to the USPTA, which was in Tampa. And he would raise his hand, and the squeaky wheel, he'd ask questions, but he was just so honest. He wasn't politically incorrect, but he wasn't really politically aware either. It was just like, this is what needs to be asked. I'm going to ask it. Very, very much well put when you said that, love of the game. He would have taught the game for free. Jumping around here, the Jimmy Rogers. Go ahead.
I remember Eric was telling me when he was in Myrtle Beach, he wanted to do coaching with inner city kids or something, right? And so he gets a bus or whatever, and he wants to have kids come in and they have to pay, like, I want to say $1 or $2, and he'd give them free tennis lessons. He just wanted to find an athlete and do it. And then he's telling me it wasn't working. These kids wouldn't get on this bus with this red-headed 6'3" white guy. And so we were talking back and forth, and then we decided that he should offer free sandwiches. And so he went down there and he put a sign on the bus, free sandwiches and free tennis. Bus was full. He would bring in like 10 or 15 kids. And I don't know how long he did it for, but Eric loved that kind of, it's unbelievable what he used to do, so. Say
that again. How do you get the kids on the bus?
By offering them free sandwiches.
Free sandwiches.
Free food.
Free food.
So he would go and get like Wonder Bread, put some salami on it, slap it together, put some mustard, give the kids some food, and they get on the bus and go to the Myrtle Beach Tennis Center and take lessons. So it was like lunch and tennis for $2 or something.
Now, we're on a college campus together, and Eric was the last guy cut from the tennis team. And the tennis team, it was very, very strong. And not necessarily looking back, was it fair? It was really an immigration center. At one time, with a few others, I ran the team on an interim basis, and there was one American who played on the men's side, and there was one American on the women's side who wasn't in the lineup. But I remember he was just so discouraged. He got cut, and just on the following Monday, he shows up, and he's got one side of his head is shaved, and I started calling him Adidas because he had 3 stripes on one side of his head. And then he was wearing a trench coat. And so he went to the dark side a little bit, but he was still in love with the game. I mean, it was too bad that someone didn't take him under his wing. And that's so true with so many college programs that, they don't look at the athlete or look at the passion. It's just like, who's winning today. And that was too bad that when I first went, the first year or two I was there, you came in like year number 3, is there was a very positive connection between the players and the program. But it got to the point where the coach didn't want his players in the tennis tech program. It was just an awkward setting where, they were learning about technique and tactics, and it was just, but yeah, I remember that with Eric. But he ended up, he went to Europe for the summer, and He came back, but then he was over there for years, correct?
Yeah, he worked with another coach that Bobby Malone, who was very close, a really good friend of mine. He'd help Bobby out. He came over and helped me out. He was over in Berlin. That's where he met Bobby, and they were working with Danny Cooper. I remember that story too. I got offered a job from Danny Cooper to go to Berlin, and I said yes. And then I sort of said, okay, what kind of car am I going to get? And Danny Cooper says, well, you got to take a bus and you got to take a train and you got to do this. And I go, I'm not taking a bus or train to go to work. And then Mark Hamlin, who was in Bad Schwartau, I guess he got wind of that, calls me up and he says, I'll give you the Mats bus, that little van that he had. And so I took the job with Mark. I go, Eric and I would always hang out together anyway. Like, hey, you want a job in Berlin? And he goes, yeah, sure. And so Danny took Eric in Berlin and Mark got me in Bad Schwartau, and then the rest is history,
At the time, Mark Hamlin, he was the first person I taught to teach tennis. I grew up with Mark Hamlin. He also was a goalie. MATS stood for Modern American Tennis Systems. We go way back when, closing the racket face on the forehand was a novelty. And Vic Braden, now people think of Vic as the dinosaur in what he stood for and such. It's so confused, so misinterpreted. But yeah, Danny Cooper now is a lawyer in Canada, but they both work for Braden and both were in Germany. Bobby Malone. There's a guy who could keep a lot of balls in play. He's from the same town as Luke and Murphy Jensen. And I one time spent 3 days with Luke Jensen and wrote an article on his program and had so much fun talking to him. And I said, we have a mutual friend. He goes, who's that? Well, you'll remember because this guy's never lost to you. This guy used to beat you badly. And I said, Bobby Malone. And Bobby Malone was a tough out. He stayed at the baseline and he never missed. And Luke Jensen said, I remember Bobby Malone. He used to hit a ground stroke and run backwards and climb the fence. But Bobby, he's back in Germany. I know he came to the States, but he left Germany like you did. But then like you also, he went back to Germany.
Yeah. No, Bobby is the most disciplined, tactical tennis player in the history of tennis. Bobby would just beat you by boring you to death, and he's got 100 wins against guys that he shouldn't have beat, but he beat them easy. And it was always fascinating to watch. Bobby's not the biggest guy and didn't have the biggest serve or any power, but he got a short ball. He'd come in with the little banana swing, come in, put away volleys, and just make guys miss from the baseline. It was, before I left to come back, we used to have battles. We'd go out and I got a couple sets off Bobby, but if it came down and we had to play for $100, Bobby's beating my ass bad, so shout out to Bobby. He's a great tennis player, great guy, really good friend.
Spoiler and Stretcher. That's in the book written by Shepard Mead, How to Succeed in Tennis Without Really Trying. He wrote a book, it was very popular before that, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. I guess he used to always talk about that is, give them the ball that they don't want. And Bobby would be even more successful today because, the approach volley, it's a lost art. People just baseline to baseline. But yeah, when he came to play a match, he brought his lunch bucket. He was going to be there all day but one thing I had a little bit of a heads up because I'm 10 years older than you guys. You're 58, I'm 68, is that I knew a little bit more about directionals and just being patient. And he just, okay, I'll do this all day and I'm just going to wait until you get the right ball to come in on. With talking about,
seen guys,
go ahead.
I've seen Bobby play against guys who are taller, stronger, fitter, more power, and Bobby would just beat the shit out of him. and Bobby just had this nice little smile, and he would just sort of smile at him and walk by, and it was fantastic. Bobby would devastate people. He would win, and guys didn't know how they lost to Bobby Malone. It's fantastic.
Well, one thing about Bobby, that take your hat off to Bobby, is he met all these students I was training in this 2-year program, and he left his profession, or he left his position. He left the profession and went back to being a student. He turned down his income and said, okay, I'm going to go back and take out a college loan and study tennis. That's pretty admirable, because most of the time, once people start making money in tennis teaching, they're certainly, not looking to, okay, I'm going to stop making money and go back and study. But one thing, all of you who went over to Europe, talk a little bit about playing club tennis. That's a positive that doesn't exist here in the States or Canada, like Europe.
Yeah, club tennis is to this day. I miss club tennis, especially here in Canada. I'm in Vancouver now, and I was for a little bit in Toronto. Club tennis is important in Europe. It's a thing. It's just part of the bloodline of the game, and it's important. And being a foreigner in a country like that, it was expected that you were going to be a good player, and you play for your team, and you put it on the line for your team. And going to club matches, it's a big thing. There's spectators there. There's a keg of beer. There's food. You cheer for your team. You see it on TV how European fans are for soccer. It's not that extreme for tennis, but there's that level of importance. Like if your team wins, it's something. And the 10-year-old who you're coaching at the club, or your 16-year-old who's coaching at the club, their aspiration is not to be a pro tennis player. Their aspiration is to play on the men's team. And they want to play on the team with Eric, or they want to play on the team with Opie, or they want to play on the team with Bobby or with Jim. And it's everything about European tennis that is strong is all based on the culture around playing club matches. And here in North America, it's not even close. I tell people stories about club matches. Sometimes our matches, we drive 3 hours to play an away match, and then the match lasts 7 to 8 hours. And then you drive home 3 hours after that. And, people don't get it, to get people to come to a club match in Canada, they have to spend 90 minutes or 2 hours of their time. They won't do it. So it's something that I know in Canada they've tried to promote it, but it has to be organic, and people here just don't give it. And in Europe, it's really, really, really important.
Well, there's so many factors. One, talk about how your team can move up or your team moves down.
Yeah, so there's different leagues. It goes all the way up for, it's called the Bundesliga, it's the second Bundesliga, all the way down to what's called Kreisklasse. And Kreisklasse is the worst of the worst. So you're in an area league. You have 6 or 7 teams in the league. If you win first place, you go up a league. The team that was in last place above you in the league, they would come down. So relegation and moving up. And again, it's a big thing. The higher you go with your team, then you start getting paid money. So that's another thing too. Is there's so many situations you're involved with good players who are 16, 17, 18 years old, and you'd say to them, "Yeah, you could go over and play NCAA tennis on a scholarship," and it didn't interest them. Because one, in the German education system, everyone gets a scholarship to a German university as long as you go to grade 13, and then you're making money playing tennis. So kids going to play at a small U.S. school in D1, they're taking a pay cut, and the tennis is probably not even as good. I had a lot of players do really good stuff, and they made a load of money. One of my best friends, his name's Carson Barron, and Carson is now he's still top ranked player in men's 50s in the world, and Carson, had a great amateur career playing club tennis and playing for the German national team and putting some pennies in his pocket as well. It's a fantastic system to get players to get better faster.
Tell us about the Auslanders. How many foreigners per team and how that works?
I don't know now, but in the 90s and early 2000s, it was like one, maybe two. So depending, I think it was two, because Eric and I would play on a team. I'd always bring in a coach and they'd play on the team. And so it was two. So it was two Americans or two foreigners, and then you'd have 4 or 5 Germans to fill up the rest of your roster. You start off by playing 6 singles matches, followed by 3 doubles matches. So in the summer, and that's all in red clay. So you start a match at 2:00 on a Saturday afternoon, and that goes to like 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And on Sundays, you'd either start the match at 9 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And like I said, if you had an easy match, it would be 5 hours. If you had a tough match, those things drag out to be 8 hours. So
with the highest league, obviously, the professional players, but it actually goes down to, as you said, a much lower level. They have juniors, they have seniors, they have different seasons, but it's really social as well. So a young player here in the U.S. or Canada, say for example, they become a high level college tennis player. I mean, we used to have under 21, we used to have over 25. Those divisions don't exist anymore. It's just really sad that these very good tennis players who don't choose to try to play the pro circuit, they end up just maybe knocking some golf balls around, but they don't stay in the stream of competitive tennis, and it's really a major problem. But it's a social outlet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. With and my son Connor, he was very fortunate to play club tennis as Auslander. The division he was in at that time, you could have 2 foreigners. I'm not sure either if it's changed or not, but and they haven't been able to do that here in the States. To say, okay, we'll have 2 foreign players per team. I know there was a junior college in South Florida at one point that in junior college they had a rule you could only have 2 foreigners, but they didn't break the rule, but the spirit of the rule, they just found they weren't on a tennis scholarship. They were on like a presidential scholarship, and they had all foreigners, but they were only supposed to have 2. Talk a little bit about the benefit of playing on red clay.
The benefit of playing on red clay, you can't hide any of your weaknesses. You're out there. I always used to say to Opie, if you can't close that racket face on the backhand, you're dead. and Eric couldn't close the racket face on his backhand. A good friend of mine here in White Rock, his name is Jamie, and I'm working on Jamie getting to close his racket face. And he's 63 years old, and he's trying hard. But on red clay, you can't close the racket face. You can't hit topspin. You can't hit a ball with some sort of trajectory. You can't play close to the baseline. You can't play far. I mean, you got to be able to do everything. And it's just the way it is. Like you're forced to play every shot in the game, and you're forced to play smart, and you're forced to play sometimes the way you don't want to play. I have one of my. I can't remember many of my wins, but I can remember a lot of my losses. And one of my losses was against this bastard named Stefan Henning. And we go out, and it's a big match. Our club against their club. He's a coach. I'm a coach. We're warming up. He's hitting top. I'm hitting top. As soon as we start playing, the son of a just hit underspin forehands, underspin backhands the whole match. He beats me like 6-1, 1-6, 6-1. And he doesn't hit topspin the whole match. I was going crazy and whatever, but he just won. He kept that ball low for 2.5 hours, and I'm trying to hit topspin, trying to come in, and I had no solution for it, and it's just the way it is on red clay. There's so many ways to win. There's so many ways to lose, and you've got to have that combination of patience and that aggressiveness of offense and defense, and the mindset to do it as well. And the combination of all that makes great tennis players. Going back to club tennis, I think the problem with North America is there's no depth. And in Europe, the depth of players who've grown up on red clay, who've played 30 years on red clay, there's a depth. You can go watch a men's 50 match in Germany or France or Spain, and you're going to see some good ball, like guys who can really play. You can watch the 30-year-olds. You can watch 70-year-olds out there hitting topspin, having battles from the baseline, moving in on a short ball and whatever. And here you don't. It's just very. I think the red clay has grown the depth of the amateur game in Europe to unprecedented numbers, where North America it hasn't. And it's just the way it is,
With so many stories, the closed racket face. For the listeners, I really was envious of my students who went to places like Germany, and they were there for a long period of time and they learned the language. I went so many times, so many years, starting with Vic Braden, where he had tennis schools throughout Germany. And I would have a translator. Ich brauche eine Übersetzer für Deutsch sprechen. My Deutsch ist kaputt. So Mark Hamlin takes me to this tennis facility, and it's all men. And I'm just watching people warm up, and Hamlin's translating for me. And I picked this guy who's got the most open racket face on the backhand side, and he's just slicing backhands. So I get everybody in, and Hamlin wants me to go in and teach forehands and backhands. And I get all these men in, and I said, I'll tell you what. And I think his name was Wolfgang. It was a very German name. And I said, I tell you what, if I can get Wolfgang to hit a topspin backhand, no instruction, what we'll do is just play doubles and drink beer. So these men were into it. They didn't want to have a clinic. And so I learned this from Braden, is that the guy basically had a forehand grip. So on the backhand side. So and I thought this was magical when I first saw Braden do it. So you put the grip on the backhand side, so they have a new grip, old wrist position. Because when you play a backhand with a forehand grip, you've got to just roll that wrist. So anyway, I drew an X in the clay right in front of him. I said, your first 3 backhands are going to hit this X right in front of you. And, then explained why, and it just got him to keep that wrist. Like Lendl and McEnroe, they didn't have a backhand grip on the backhand ground stroke. But Lendl, you remember, he just turned that wrist down. He had the racket face closed, and he just lifted up. Where McEnroe, he had to roll it, and he was going to the net right away because of it. So anyway, I got the guy to hit some topspin backhands, and we just drank beer and played doubles. So those guys were really happy. But yeah, you definitely want to be able to hit clean top on both sides. Do you remember? Go ahead.
The weird thing about it is, even today, I played tennis with a group of guys who are all between 45 and 60, and everyone's pretty good, right? It's a very good level. But, guys will ask me questions about this, and you talk to them about, basic stroke biomechanics, close the racket face, and these guys are still skeptics. Every time we're drinking beer after playing doubles, guys say, well, I kept the ball in the strings a little longer on that shot. I held the ball in the strings. I came over the ball really good on my backhand, and I didn't come over the ball as good as on my forehand. And I just look at them and go, guys, you've never held the ball in your strings. You've never come over the ball. It's hard to swallow sometimes,
Well, I'll tell you a story about the racket face being open. Jim Rogers, not afraid to chirp, make some comments from the sidelines. Good hockey boy from Winnipeg. And a junior at that time, he went on and, he had a world ranking. I think it was in the 300s, but Christoph Mueller, Georges Mueller's son, he, I think he had just turned 17, but he had won the 16s at that time in Germany. Not sure if he was a state champion or national champion. I think there was 11 states in former West Germany. But he was being so rude to Hamlin. I said, you and I are going to play, this afternoon. And I remember you come walking up to the courts and start chirping, Christoph, play to his forehand. So I very quickly told you to shut up. And I said, Rogers, I haven't played a match in 3 years. But at that time, I was still going out and running my 10 miles, which was great therapy. And anyway, with that, I said, I'm going to lose the first set to this kid, but there's no way I'm going to lose the match. So anyway, I had to get you to shut up because I wasn't taught too well on the forehand side. But yeah, no, it's too bad that we're not a nation here in the U.S. I'd say in Canada as well. We're not a nation of clay courts, red clay courts. Here in Florida, I know you spent a lot of time with us in Florida, that there's the American clay. But even like a place like Texas, a lot of the clubs will have American clay, but they don't have tournaments on clay. But I think for the most part, especially where you spent your time in Central and Northern Europe, that the players have the best of both, where they're playing outdoors on the red clay, but then they would play indoors primarily on carpet when you first went over there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, over the years, I ended up getting a group together, and I bought the Neustadt Tennis Halle with 3 other partners, and then we had outside 2 hard courts, and no one played on them. Like if you're playing outside in Europe, you're playing on red clay. You're not playing anything else. But as soon as that date hits the 1st of October, you're playing indoors on the carpet, and the carpet is also a very good surface. You could play fast, you could serve and volley and stuff like that. So there's always a great mix from basically the 15th of April to the 30th of September. You're on red clay, and then on 1st of October until the 15th of April, you're indoors on the carpet. So it's always a good exchange of tactical ideas and technical ideas that you have to master, because everyone's good. Like you have to be a player, and you have to have all facets of your game, from serving, returning, advancing forward, and so on.
Oh, the contrast is very important, where, say, an American kid just plays on hard court. Coming back to what you said earlier about the depth, I remember taking juniors to tournaments, during summers in Europe, and every round was tough. There was no easy matches, and everybody really, again, the clay court being a teacher, everybody could just keep the ball in play. Everybody had a very, very good defensive game. The different phases of your player development, your game itself, do you have any recollection for the Jim Rogers warm-up in the early days? What comes to your mind when I ask that? What's that?
The Jim Rogers warm-up was a Dr. Pepper and a donut. So,
Dr. Pepper and a donut. But this is even better. I mean, it definitely was a Dr. Pepper and a donut. That might have been even as you got better and better in playing more and more experienced players. But I remember the guys would say that you would play somebody you never played before, and your goal in the warm-up was to hit the back fence, the side fence, on either side, right to the left, and you would just scream out, I have no backhand. And that was your way to try to get them to play to your backhand in the first set, so you'd win the first set. I always thought that was the Jim Rogers warm-up.
Well, I didn't want that to be public knowledge. On any big point, I wanted guys, even to this day, my forehand is an embarrassment. Like, I can hit the shit out of it, but you want to win a point, go to my forehand. But I do that. I do everything except hit a backhand topspin into the court. And I've won a lot of matches in my day. I've lost a lot of matches, but the matches I've won is because my backhand was the go-to shot. So there might have been some gamemanship there. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Well, I think you're either a ESTP or a ESFP. You're Eddie Shack. Tell us about Eddie Shack. Very quickly, the late Eddie Shack. What comes to your mind? Eddie the entertainer.
Clear the track. Here comes Shack. Eddie Shack was a guy who couldn't read, was as poor can come, had nothing, made the NHL, and became a third line grinder who would do whatever it takes for his team to win. And in today's age, everyone says that, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes. But a guy like Eddie Shack, who grew up in the 50s, played in the 60s, and his career ended in the 70s, he was an entertainer. You know, like Eddie Shack went out there and made professional hockey fun for where he was. He played with Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and at the end he was with the LA Kings and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he was a man's man, and he could score goals or go to the front of the net and battle hard, and he would also battle after the game in the bars. So Eddie Shack was one of the game's greatest characters in the NHL.
Well, the reason I ask Eddie Shack, you ask about Eddie, but the thing is have fun. I mean, I know on the Myers-Briggs, I'm a J, and you're a P. So I think it's very important to, understand that you've got to have fun while you play the game. Yeah, we can touch upon my son playing club tennis in Germany. I remember him drinking a few beers. I thought it was really maybe the first time he was drinking beer. Maybe he was 17, 18. A group of coaches were chatting about tennis. And I said, Connor, you're drinking some beers. And I go, is this the first time? And he goes, I think he was 16. He goes, don't you remember you sent me to Germany when I was 16 to play on a men's team? And so it was just a given. But I think it was very, very good for him coming back to team tennis because I think that, some of the players, Dave Squire, who set it up, thought, well, he's being a little bit of a slacker in practice. But to have a 16-year-old and a 45-year-old comes up to you and goes, hey, kid, don't give up tonight. Whatever you do, just keep fighting. We need you to win. And I think that's where, like, even high school tennis here in the U.S., I don't think it was ever really that strong in Canada. Even like high school hockey has never been that strong in Canada. But to play on a team. Tell me about taking Connor to a tournament. That's a great story.
Connor, we went from Tampa to somewhere in Miami. We drove through Alligator Alley and what I remember, this we may have to fact check this, but I do remember we get into whatever hotel we get into, and then the kid goes into the hotel and puts his stuff on the bed. And I look at it, I go, what are you doing? Like, I'm sleeping on the bed, you're sleeping on the couch. And so I did sleep on the couch. I did sleep on the bed, and Connor did sleep on the couch. I can't remember if he won or lost that tournament or whatever, but Connor got schooled on the ride. So I think what's it, a 4-hour drive to Miami back and forth. So
a little longer,
and that 8 hours, I think was one of his best schoolings ever. So,
well, I have many thoughts from that trip. Is one, he had never met you before, and I think the backstory is you just mentioned that you're a part owner. I remember the tennis club in Germany, and it was really interesting. There was, like, say, 5 little villages, and there was somebody that came from our program, and you were all working together. It was amazing. I'm thinking, this is not happening in the States, where you all had autonomy. You're all doing your own thing, but you're getting juniors to get together and practice and play. And I remember in the worst way, you wanted to go back. You wanted to go back to Canada, so you went back to Canada. I go, Jimmy, you're set up pretty well here. But we can get back to the trip you took with Connor. But so I'm whatever I am. I'm a consultant. I'm the coach of the coaches, and I'm assigned to go with young Jim Rogers, who had already spent 2 years with me, and now he's in charge of, you'd paid your dues and maybe another year, a year had gone by, whatever, but you're in charge of this program. So I'm dropped off and I go, this is where Rogers runs the program for the weekdays. And I said, okay. So I walk in and I got there a little before you show up, and you got like 3 or 4 newspapers and a big thing of donuts. And we sit down. And it was like 2 hours before any tennis started. And it all became very clear to me that you popped in some VCRs of ice hockey. And it was donuts, reading the paper and watching ice hockey tapes. But with that,
people don't understand. Before the internet, the USA Today was a must read in Germany.
Yeah, no, but I remember I remember sending you hockey tapes, and it was like gold. Yeah. It was like gold. You'd be sending you tapes of hockey games, but. Yeah. Anyway, the timetable of all that, you were in between and you were coming to the States and you needed to have some work. You're in North America. And at the time it's much easier now, but it was very difficult. Once we had a pro working in Europe, it was very difficult for them to come back to the US and reestablish themselves, or back to US, Canada, North America. So anyway, you fly in.
Yeah, it's very difficult. The most difficult part about it is, Opie used to say it all the time. In Europe, we're a rock star, and in the United States, coaches are garbage men. Not to discourage people from being garbage men, but you're going from being the guy to being just a guy, and that's really, really hard. It goes back to the culture of the game and the status of the game, and what you're doing as a running academy or tennis school, we used to call them. You were the guy, and it's a great feeling. I mean, we none of us, there's Ross Brown who's still out there, and Bobby Malone and myself and Eric and whatever. So we were never making millions, but we were the guy. And your word, whatever you said, was listened to. Bobby's been there 30 years. Ross has been 30 years. I was there 30 years. So you have a level of credibility that is unbelievably high. And then you come back to Canada or the United States and no one gives it. And you're just looking around going like, what's going on here? And it's even Mark, I'm sure Mark's been there close to 40 years now. And, but I get it, coming back, it's not only a culture change, but it's a change in your self-worth. Even when I went to Toronto with Richard, I'm playing ITF tournaments and no one cares. No one cares. It's like, no one cares. And in Germany, it's or Europe, it's different. It just is. And that's for a lot of coaches who went to Europe as a 20-year-old. And, we all had thoughts of going back. Ross, I'm sure, thought back to England, Bobby's back to Florida, me to Canada. And you come back as the returning son, and, your credibility would be very high. It's the absolute opposite. No one cares, and you're just a guy. And that's why guys stay out there for such a long period of time. I even see it in hockey. It's the same thing in hockey, so. Really,
I was going to say, because, you've been Canadian where hockey is number one. I was going to ask, do you think that reason for that is tennis is really a major sport in Europe, where here it's a minor sport? I mean, why do you think, what are some of the reasons that you're held in higher esteem? Well, you're a tennis teaching professional.
Yes. Yeah, the thing is, here in Canada, what's weird is the Canadians have always wanted stars, right? So they get Milos Raonic, who's a star. They get Jeannie Bouchard, who's a lesser star. You've got Andreescu, who's a huge star. You've got Felix, who's a huge star. Denis Shapovalov, who's a huge star. We win Davis Cup, and no one gives a shit. like
Yeah.
it's the seventh story. It's the seventh story on the news channel. You know, like if I would just go down to get a coffee at the coffee shop, and I go, "Hey, Canada won Davis Cup," people go like, "What's Davis Cup?" No one knows. And even in the tennis community that I'm in here, it was celebrated for 5 days, 6 days. Today, no one talks about it. When Germany would win the Davis Cup, when Sweden would win the Davis Cup, when Spain would win the Davis Cup, it's like a national happening. It's like the whole population, like old people knew who Boris Becker and Michael Stick and Steffi Graf were. Non-tennis people knew that. Non-tennis people knew that they won the Davis Cup. Here, non-tennis people, no one knows, no one cares. And Tennis Canada position where they have these personalities who have great world rankings, and they're doing nothing with it. And it's amazing. Like I don't get it. Like I really don't get it. Like Canadian tennis right now has stars. This is what Canada's won in the last 40, 50 years. They wanted to have stars. They have them, and nothing's happening. There's no real change amongst the non-tennis community. Like tennis is not more popular right now than it was 15 years ago. You know, so
Yeah, once in a while.
That's my little rant.
My
little rant.
I mean, Raonic gets to the Wimbledon final, and maybe he gets a shout out at Maple Leaf Gardens. They put the spotlight on him, and they clap for a few minutes. But yeah, it's not really embraced like it should be. But you came back 2 different times. My recollection is that when you did leave, and this guy comes back into there's so many stories to touch upon. We were talking about my son Connor. But you left Germany. You had a very good setup. And didn't you work for Tennis Canada and you went out to Saskatchewan or based in Saskatoon?
Yeah, that was more of a consulting thing. That was a huge mistake. I went out there for, I think it was 3 or 4 months, and I said, I got to get out of here. It was the worst of the worst. No indoor facilities, and it's minus 40 for 70 days of the winter. Yeah, it was so bad, right? It's like playing hockey in Taiwan. It just didn't work. And the funny thing is, I was just talking to my buddy yesterday. Right now, one of the top Canadian juniors, a 16-year-old player, is from Saskatchewan. So I just saw that the other day. His kid's like number 40 in the ITF rankings, and good on him. But he moved to Toronto, where I ended up. And he's, I guess, this kid's at the National Tennis Center, which is close to Richmond Hill, where we were. And tennis in Canada is a big city sport. So it's Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, Quebec, Montreal. That's it. So if you're not in a big city, tennis has zero importance.
Yeah, it's certainly, it's not countrified. With go ahead.
Even sorry, but I had a friend of mine. I hired him to come work for me in Germany, and he's right now the executive director of tennis in Prince Edward Island, which is on the east coast, very close to Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. And his name is Dave Mitchell, and Dave's a very similar guy to Eric. He's loves the game, high energy, loves coaching and helping people, and he's out there in Prince Edward Island banging his head against the wall, and is trying to get coaches to be able to coach better, which is a major problem, and then trying to develop a culture of importance towards the game. And Dave's one of the best people to do the job, and he's wondering what the hell he's doing sometimes. He's going like, these people, it's so hard to generate interest or motivation or whatever you want to call it. It's really weird,
So many things to talk about. I'll come back to the story. I think that could lead us into your passion for golf and all the time you spent with golf. But so you were in Germany, came back, worked as a consultant out in Western Canada, go back to Germany, and then you came back to Toronto. Tell us what it was like with Dennis Shapovalov, because he was at that Richmond Hill facility for 10 years with his mom, Tessa.
Yeah, with Tessa. So Tessa, that's a tough chick. But Dennis, he was there. I first met Dennis, he was probably 7 or 8 years old. And he was a very good player. Like when you see a 8 or 9 year old Dennis or whatever he was, outstanding, right? Like, I mean, Tessa did a hell of a job with that kid, but he wasn't the nicest little kid out there, you know. So Dennis and I never really coached Dennis. We would do group lessons, and he'd be in the group with the other kids. And Dennis really only listened to Tessa, and he'd listen to Richard if Richard was yelling at him. But no, Dennis, one good little tennis story is he's on the court with me and all the kids, and he's like 10 years old or 11, whatever he is, right? And all the kids are supposed to pick up the balls, and Dennis is not picking up the ball. So I let Dennis know in my third language that he should pick up the ball. And Dennis picks up a ball, throws it towards the basket, picks up another ball, throws it towards the basket, misses it. I tell him, if you throw another ball at the basket, I'm going to hit you on the hand. And Dennis walks right up, throws up the ball, misses the basket. I smack him right on the top of the hand with his racket. And he drops like a bag of hammers. And it's like, oh, a little whiny, you know. As she comes over, she goes, Jim, did you just hit Dennis on the hand with the racket? I go, yes, I did. And he goes, why? I told him if he doesn't throw the ball in the basket, I'm going to hit him on the hand with the racket. She looks at Dennis. She goes, is that true? Dennis goes, yeah. She goes, you're an idiot. And she says that to Dennis. So that's my Dennis Shapovalov story.
No, that's a good story. Yeah. But the work ethic was impressive, correct? I mean, you had the passion.
You know, we would have coaching meetings, and Tessa was, from day one that I met her, she was absolutely certain that her son was going to be a pro tennis player. And she, you know, I mean, they did before school sessions, she'd be on the court with him, you know, after school sessions in the group. When the group's over, 9 o'clock at night, I mean, that kid hit, you know, everyone talks about 10,000 balls and stuff. That kid did hit 10,000 balls. That the kid was wrong for the journey was good, but Tessa did like a hell of a job. And I remember we were in a meeting. Hubert was there, Richard and I and Tessa, and we're sort of saying, you know, he should maybe consider NCAA, you know, like USC, UCLA or whatever. She goes, he's not going to college. He's a pro tennis player. Can't you see it? And then the theme was sort of, well, maybe it would just be an option. And she goes, no. And then Dennis left the program, and she formed her own indoor facility. And then I think he left when he was like 13 or 14, and then it just went from there. And she was right. You know, she was absolutely right. So
yeah, we certainly talked to Miran Mann, who you know so well, and Richard Hernandez, because same club, the three of you. Richard said that Tessa couldn't speak English, but you just go with the years. He was there from the age of 3 to 13. I remember being on the phone training sessions, and there were certain things that she didn't buy into. One was having the racket face be more vertical at the impact point on volleys. With Miran talks about that because he was a hitting partner, that there was just no doubt. One of the players we've worked with for a long time, Liberty Secchi, she was quite good, had some problems with her back, but she ended up making all these changes in her game. She was at Bollettieri's, and she was very good friends, same age as Sharapova. And a lot of people don't know that Sharapova incognito would laugh Bollettieri's every month for an extended period of time, and she went out and worked with Lansdorp. But she would go back to the academy, so she really had the best of both. And she won Wimbledon at 17, and there was an exhibition with maybe 5,000 people. And this friend, Liberty Svecki, was interviewed, and they said, "Do you think that Maria is really surprised by everything that's going on?" And she said, "Absolutely not. She's not surprised at all. It was just, like no doubt." And I think that you see that with Kenin, for example, with her father. I know they perhaps had a little bit of falling out, but I can understand they're back together now. But it's like, no, you will make it. And I think for years also, I think, it's been said about American tennis players that there's some negativity to thinking, well, a college scholarship. I do think that a lot of people think a college scholarship is a consolation prize. That's not what we're going for. We're going for the real thing. I tell people if they really play well and they stay healthy, they got to do well academically. They got to take care of their GPA and their SATs. But if someone's taught to play really well from an early age, especially, and they just have that fight, they can really compete. And so on one side, to me, it's not that big a deal to play college tennis. On the other hand, less than 3% play college tennis, but most people, by the time you or I meet them, they're 13 years old and they have 5 years of bad myelin. They just had such a bad start. And then they don't really come from a society, the tennis culture, where they're really exposed to what it takes to be an athlete. Even though we're a country of 330 million here in the U.S., we have top players, but not everyone is connected to being around what it takes to become a tennis player.
Yeah, for sure. Most kids are good tennis players are really surprised and unfamiliar with how uncompromising and how intense the next level of play is once you get into money tennis, or kids don't understand it. It's the same what I see in hockey now. Everyone thinks you can play as a 16-year-old, you can play as a 20-year-old, and you can't. In tennis, it's the same thing. The intensity is too high, and these kids program for it. Where Tessa and Dennis, they didn't have a plan B, and they put all the chips in, and it worked, and good on him. And I think that's part of his strength as a tennis player is that he was meant to do what he's doing. And I think, I don't know Dennis at all, right, as an adult, but I think one of his strengths is he just loves playing the game because that's what he does, and he does it very well. And that's part of his success. He's hit 1 million balls, and he loves hitting 1 million balls, and he loves being a dog and getting in shape and going through that grind. So for him, he's not unfamiliar with how intense it is.
And the mom clearly understood that the junior tennis was junior tennis. I can remember hearing stories where, he's based in Toronto, and, there's a tournament in Vancouver, a national tournament, and he didn't go. They weren't really wrapped up in the junior scene as far as, who's going to be the best junior.
Well, I'll tell you another Tessa story. So in Toronto, she lived 2 or 3 streets away from me, right? And Dennis was in it was either the quarterfinals or the semifinals or the finals of Wimbledon and of juniors. And I said to her, I go, you got to fly over. This is something. This is what you've been working for. And Tessa said, no, it's just a junior tournament, and I was surprised. The mother didn't go watch her son play Wimbledon. And I can't remember if he ended up winning the junior Wimbledon or not, or he either lost in the final or he won the final. I can't remember, but she didn't go, and for me, to this day, you're just telling that story. It's amazing. She was dialed in. That's all I'll say.
No, it's a great story. Actually, with Richard Hernandez and Miran Mann, we one time had a few juniors on the phone. One of the reason we did it is that one of the juniors had fired one of the coaches that we trained. The coach had, crossed the line, and a really good coach is going to cross the line and be emotional, and the parents just really need to understand that every day. Vic Braden, every day is not a golden day. And, and both Richard and Miran, just told stories just like that. And it's got to be long-term vision. I like to tell young tennis players, dream big and, forget the UTR and the ITF points and such. And it's just really, in the end, everybody is over the age of 18, and there's WTA points and ATP points. And the people I know that get to the point where they're making money, and that's very few, we're making money in tennis. If they could turn the clock back, they would go. I would realize just what you said about Tessa, is that junior tennis is junior tennis, and not to get so crazy about it. Anyway, let's just talk about golf for a minute. So let me say this. So when you show up in that hotel room with my son, and my understanding is you walked in the room and you just said, I hope that couch is going to be comfortable. And Connor didn't realize at first, okay, I'm going to sleep on the couch. But then you pulled up and there was a driving range right across the street. And you said, well, I'll come to your matches, but you're going to have to find all your warm-ups and practices because you're going to hit golf balls. And I just think those type of outings, I want to talk about another one when you were maybe like 21 years old. So I was with Rob Krychek that weekend. I remember very clearly because we were meeting with the USTA on player development. Craig Tiley, who went to the same program you did, he had, when he became the director of player development for Tennis Australia, he said it would take 10 years for him to develop a network of coaches. So Rob Krychek contacted the USTA and said, Steve Smith already has a network of coaches, a national network of coaches. So we had that meeting, and I remember we sent you in one of the vehicles that we had, and I didn't know if I would be at the tournament, but Connor ended up, I believe he was in the finals. He played Spencer Wolf. And so I just remember telling you that I said, yeah, I take him to tournaments. We go to Outback, at least just one time. So I show up, and for our listeners, Jim at one time was one of my students. I show up and he says, hey, Smith, go give me a Coke. I go, all right. So I go get you a Coke. And then it's time to go get something to eat. And it wasn't dinner time, but I said, okay, let's go. We go to Outback. And listeners, we go in, and Jim Rogers and everybody in the place knew him. Every waiter, waitress, bartender, hey, Jim, how you doing? And I said, have you been here before? He goes, yeah, too bad they're not open for breakfast. We came here for lunch and dinner every day. But I remember so many things where you had Connor with a service return ritual. You made him touch his hat every time because he was rushing. And at the end, you had three things for him. He said, number one, get fit. Number two, get fit. And number three, that Canadian adjective that is used loosely is get effing fit. But anyway, tell us about golf. I mean, I know we can go from one thing to the next, but I told Richard Hernandez, I said, yeah, I'm talking to Jimbo. And he goes, that boy has passion for, I think he said that man. I call you the true Canadian. He's a paper Canadian. But you have passion for that sport as well. Tell us a little bit about your golf background.
Well, yeah. As a kid in Winnipeg, I would dabble, play here and there. But it was the year 2000 or 1999, 2000. And my relationship with Ross Brown changed. We were sort of, we didn't know each other from Texas, but we knew each other. He had his program, I had my program, and it was like the Montreal Canadiens against Toronto Maple Leafs. It wasn't a love affair. We were competing against each other. But then, he was at the golf club that was in my town. He takes me out. We go golfing, and our friendship really started from golf. And Ross would put a beat down on me on the golf course. And, I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. And at that time, my kid was about 8 years old, 7, 8 years old. And I had the tennis ball, and I was trying to find what sport she was going to do, right? And we tried, the hockey thing, the baseball, basketball, she's doing everything. And my kid could hit a golf ball. And so basically Ross Brown brought me into the golf game, which got my daughter into the golf game. And, from that on, 10 years later, she got a full ride to the University of Missouri in the SEC conference, and ended up having a great career there. And from that, my game as well got better and better, to the point where I was beating Ross Brown on a consistent basis, just to let Ross know that.
There you go.
There you go.
With Rossi,
I've
baby.
made a lot more money with Ross Brown than Ross Brown has made with me.
What's that? Say that again.
But I've made a lot more money from Ross Brown than Ross Brown has made money from me. So.
No, Ross from the Englishman. He actually, I haven't talked to him in years, but he bought that 3-court tennis hall in Bad Schwartau and converted it to indoor soccer, correct?
Yeah, and I think that thing went up as well, but it wasn't his. He was just renting to them, and I don't even know what they're doing then now. I know he still owns it, but I don't know what they're doing in that now. If it's back to tennis or still soccer, I have no idea what he's doing that. But no, Ross was a great tennis player as well. Lefty serve and volley, he'd come in all the time. Indoors, Ross was tough to beat. Outdoors, not so much, but indoors, great tennis player,
The golfer's mentality. I was watching the US Open the other day, and I'm telling tennis players, they would really benefit if they understood what a golfer's mentality is. Talk a little bit about technique when you think about golf.
Yeah, well, the crazy thing is, the craziest thing about golf is people will pay $10 to get 70 golf balls and hit them into a field at a golf range. And then if you ask that same player to take 70 tennis balls, go to a public court, and hit 70 serves, they'll look at you as if you're psychotic. So, same with video. A golfer, all he wants to do is see a technical analysis on video of his swing. He wants to see if his impact angle is 2 degrees downwards. He wants to see his, the length of his swing. They want to see numbers. They want to see facts. You say that to a tennis player, they go, "Oh no, I don't want to see it. I don't want to do video." It's such a dichotomy of attitude changes where golf practice is really important, and understanding biomechanics and technicalities is really, really, really stressed. And in tennis, it's, oh no, I got to feel better. I got my own style. I got, all this stuff that people talk about. But again, when you look across North America, the depth of amateur golf, because of that, is really, really deep, as opposed to the depth of North American tennis. Like right now, in Canada, there are guys who are 25 years old to 55 years old who are scratch golfers, and there's thousands of them, but there's not many scratch tennis players. You know what I mean?
No, it's really interesting the way you say put that 70 balls off the driving range or 70 serves. If people don't look at it the same. I grew up. Well,
have you ever seen someone take 70 tennis balls, go to a tennis court, and drop it backhand? Like, if you tell someone to do that, they think you're crazy. But then that same person goes to the driving range and does that.
Yeah. No, looking back, having grown up with golfers, my grandfather used to call it cow pasture pool, and my father used to always say, because I had every opportunity, that was just part of our lifestyle as a family. We were fortunate enough to, if we wanted to go to the golf club, we could go to the golf club. And I just didn't play. I caddied quite a bit, but I just was around it. I mean, I can tell golf stories all day. I don't know really anything about golf, but again, the golfer's mentality that they're into strokes. I mean, I've heard it said that a golfer would run through fire to lower their score by a shot or two, stroke or two. And tennis players, many times it's like, well, I just need to hit with better players. I just need to get a better warm up. And but I think you could talk about this in golf. You're really playing against the course, and in tennis, you're playing, as Braden would say, you're playing against the toad on the other side. And the toad's not too good. So you beat the toad, you think you're pretty good, but the golf course tells you loud and clear. I mean, it's pretty difficult to, you think about making a birdie, making an eagle, let alone just making par. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. That the fun thing I had is with my daughter, and she's turning 31 this next month or in 2 weeks, and seeing her going from nothing in Germany to being a scholarship golfer to now where I play with her, once or twice a week here in Vancouver now. It's fantastic. Just another story. But I was with Alina in Columbia, South Carolina. And she's playing this tournament, and she's getting recruited by Furman, by Nebraska, some big schools, right? And those coaches are there, and it's a tournament of the best at the time. And I had told her either Opie was going to come to visit us, or we were going to go visit Opie after the tournament. And he was still sick then, and he shouldn't really travel. And she plays absolute dog, right? So after the round, I tell her, get in the car. We're going to Myrtle Beach. And she's got a tee time the next day, like at 2:00 in the afternoon. And so we drove 4 hours in the car. I'm yelling at her in the car, taking notes. She's repeating the notes to me, what she has to do. But the whole thing was, golf is not hard. You should just be happy to be here and just play. So we show up in Myrtle Beach, and she hadn't seen Eric in 7 or 8 years, and he looked terrible. He looked really sick. So we tell him the story. She shot like 8 feet, and Eric's first thing, he could barely walk at that time. He could barely walk. We put him into my van. We drive to a driving range, and there's a rocking chair. And Eric sits down in the rocking chair and says to my kid, start hitting balls. And Eric knows nothing about golf. And I'm not going to say that I know anything about golf either. But Eric is coaching my kid, and he's on his deathbed. And, and coaching her at like 8:00 at night on some range in Myrtle Beach. Next morning, we have breakfast. Eric says, we're going to the range again. We go to the range again. Same thing. We say, that was my last time I saw Eric alive, right? So it was very emotional. We go in. Moral of the story is he basically told her, suck it up, Buttercup, and play better. But she did. She didn't win the tournament or anything. It's not a Disney story, but, it left an impression on her, and it just goes to show that Eric, he was just into helping people. Even to this day, my daughter still talks about that. She goes like, we call it an incident. Me and her had an incident, but Eric was coached her up, and she went out there and played better ball, so.
Oh, it's a great story. Suck it up, Buttercup. No, you sent your daughter, you laid it down to our place, so we had sunshine and access to the golf courses, and so she was a she was a golf kid staying with these tennis kids, and it is just a more professional approach. It's not like, who am I going to hit with? It's, okay, we're going to get you to the driving range. You can chip and you can putt. We'll get that organized. They have all the facilities, and then you're just going to play. And I remember going around in the golf cart with her. I mean, it was amazing how skilled she was, but it takes years. I think that so many crazy stories. I worked at a place in Tampa actually pros I trained worked there, but I had access to the facility. And what they did at the golf club is they gave all the members of the New York Yankees and the Tampa Bay Bucks, they gave them passes to the golf course. And it was so bad. Golf balls never landed on the tennis court, but these big, strong athletes were whacking at golf balls and they didn't know how to play. But I do think that most people who really learn to play and play well in golf, how they start from the beginning, the grips are important. The swings are important. And then the etiquette and then the whole way of life is important. Why don't you just talk a little bit more about that? We'll go on to something else.
Yeah. Well, part of that is when we were in Toronto, I had heard about this posh country club that had a caddy program. So I send my kid over, and the director of golf ends up being her coach. His name is Phil Hardy, a fantastic guy, and he was very hesitant to take a young girl, as a caddy. And this is a place where you pay $100,000 to be a member, and everyone's a millionaire or billionaire. And so she goes into the interview, and there's like 5 or 6 guys in suit and tie. She's there. They ask him, what you're a young girl. What's going to happen on the golf course when one of our members hits a bad shot and might say something that is inappropriate? She goes, well, I play golf with my dad and his friends, and there's nothing I haven't heard. So bring it on. And so she was hired on the spot, and she ended up being a personal caddy from a guy who owns like 500 franchises called Bolt Barn, and it was a great experience for her to see the other side of what's possible after you work hard and get some opportunities and do the right thing. And that left a lasting experience on her. It's called Beacon Hall, and it's one of the things that really formed her as a golfer. There's going to be adverse things in your way, but there's going to be some good things in your way as well. So she's learned to use that as part of her set of principles.
So it was a great combination. It was a job, it was work, it was also a privilege to be able to use the facilities, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. She got free coaching, free use. She was able to use it as her personal club, and Phil, again, we always talk about coaches, her first and second base coaches in Germany were Zonka and Georg, 2 really good friends of mine, who taught her the basics of the game. And when we moved to Toronto, then Phil Hardy got her to third base. And then from third base to home base was her college coach, Coach Coop. Her name is Stephanie. And Coop and her assistant coach, Mindy, they did the rest. So, in her career, she had 4 coaches, and each coach worked basically together with the last coach to help a player get better faster, and I really enjoyed that. We didn't coach hop or anything. It was like 2 coaches in Germany. They worked at the same club where Ross and I played, and they're still coaching there, or Ross still takes lessons from both of the guys. And Phil in Toronto, helped Alina immensely, and Coop, her college coach, she still talks to my daughter monthly. She's like her big sister. So it was a great thing. It's just 4 great coaches doing a great job, and I'm so appreciative of it and thankful for those people coming into our lives, and they're lasting relationships for me and my daughter. I think that's what sport's all about. Is not so much the sport, but the relationships you get from it.
And it's a great story. Also, the continuity. It's not like one coach is drastically different than the other, like you find in tennis, correct?
Oh, absolutely not. When we were in Toronto, she was getting, getting love from the provincial association, the national association, and they were trying to sway me to have her go into these national provincial programs. And I said, no, I'm not doing it. The guy I have, I trust, I like, my kid loves him. I don't need to go to some provincial program to get a T-shirt and some other bullshit, the guys, as we say, in the trenches, and I'm loyal to that. They did great work. I'm not going to just switch coach for a T-shirt. That's stupid. So and for us, for her, it worked out.
No, it's great loyalty. Here's a blast from the past. Clayton Stanley. He was born in 1974. What year were you born?
I was born in 64.
So that's what I thought. So he was probably 11. You were probably 21. And Tyler, Texas to Corpus Christi is a long ways away. And I remember going, okay, Rogers, and I said, hey, you need to make any money? You need to make some part-time money? I said, yeah. So I said, all right. I said, it's not a weekend with the college boys. There's no drinking. There's no partying. You're going to drive a long, long ways. Take this kid to Corpus Christi. And I think it's one of the reasons I bring this up is I don't think enough parents understand that it's so important to let your kid travel with just coaches. It's not always mom and dad. And, I understand, why parents have to be extremely careful. We use the expression that kids are, they're rightfully so, they're overprotected, but they're underprepared. So I just remember asking Clayton, Clayton, did you hear any profanity on your trip with Jim Rogers? I said, you just have to remember, that's just part of the Canadian twang. What's your memory from taking him? I know our listeners, he was like the original guinea pig. And we had this program, it grew where we had over 100 students learning to teach tennis. So we tried to have every local kid, and we were just really working with 10 or less. And we asked the parents if they could to build a backboard. So he had a really nice backboard built as a house. He played multiple sports. I remember he was a very good little basketball player. And we could find matches for him because we had 100 students. We could find matches at different levels for the guinea pigs. But the guinea pigs, when they would come to our evening lab, because back in the day, there was no homeschooling, it was a regular school, but they were really on stage. They were taking lessons on stage. It'd just be one station, but it might be 25, 30 coaches on a set of bleachers watching them take a private lesson for 15 minutes or working on doubles. And what's your recollection on that road trip?
Two things stand out. One is he wasn't only the guinea pig, but he was also the golden boy.
Golden boy.
I remember that. And so the drive down, we're just talking, and I remember driving into Corpus Christi, and I just didn't know better. But Mr. Stanley gave me a wad full of money, and we got to get a hotel. And I find some $29 per night hotel, and we drive in, and Clayton's going like, "Dude, the Holiday Inn Express, we just passed it." I'm going, "No, we're not going there. We're gonna stay here. We're gonna man up."
Man up.
And we're gonna man up, because I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I kind of thought maybe Clayton was a little soft. But anyway, so the second thing I remember, he's playing or whatever, and he's playing like dog, and there's a break. He wins the first set or loses, whatever, and it's one set all. There's a break. He comes, he gets like a 10-minute break because it's hot or whatever, and he wanted a pat on the back, and I gave him the consequential kick in the ass. I was giving him like, "What the heck are you doing out there? Man up. This kid's like total dog you're playing against. Just go out and beat his brains in." And fortunately it worked, so that's what I remember about Clayton Stanley. I'm sure he was never the same after that weekend, but
very sharp guy. he, in the worst way, he wanted to go to Texas. He certainly could have gone to so many other schools, but he went to Texas, and he was a lineup guy. He played for the University of Texas, which is big time. And Clayton's maybe even a little bit smaller than I am. He's not a very big guy, but yeah, he was the original guinea pig. But I think, again, trips like that, and you have to, if you reflect back, you were very new to tennis, but it's like, I just knew that, you had the people skills, the character, and you just give that boy a little bit of ice hockey. And I'm sure that's what I would have summed it up if I was a fly on the wall listening to what you were telling him in between the end of the.
Well, it's
second.
funny. I talked to my friend here, and he asked me about Germany a lot, and I about if I want to get back into tennis here in Canada, and I go, the way that I'm effective as a coach, is not politically correct right now, and it would be so hard, in the niche that I am now with hockey and running my golf company. It's good, but just seeing how tennis is right now, the country club atmosphere of wealthy kids playing the sport in tennis, that's not a good mix for Jim Rogers as a tennis coach. And I'm so grateful that I had a long run in Germany. It was perfect timing for me, and the way that my coaching skill and the way the atmosphere around how I coach, it just works. And now we always reflect once we get older, and when I assess how things went, I am so lucky that I didn't start coaching tennis in Canada when I was young, because I would have quit. Like when I see coaches here, what I saw in Toronto, what the other coaches here in Vancouver, it's pitiful. And I can't even watch it. And I can't even imagine myself being within it right now, too, because I just couldn't take it. And, it's 100% my problem, but it's a fault that I'm just glad I don't have to do.
Well, you paid your dues. That's where, and I'll go back to Clayton Stanley, for example. He's talking a little bit soft. I became very good friends with his father. He's passed away now, but so when Clayton turned 16, I would beg his father. I said, "I'll tell you what, let's organize it where he gets my little white pickup truck." But Dave bought him a brand new Ford Mustang. I mean, I was begging. I said, because he rode around that little pickup truck forever. And, so he got a nice shiny red Ford Mustang when he turned 16. But here for our listeners, a golden boy, it was just a different time. A kid like that in Texas, you went to regular school. High school tennis was a big thing to play high school tennis. I mean, he became a 5A singles, 5A doubles champion in the state of Texas, and with kids from the same program having the same type of results. For our listeners though, he was the golden boy in the sense that he worked one-on-one with Vic Braden, or Jim Lair came to town and it's like, Clayton, he's got a birthday party. I said, well, we'll pick him up. You'll come over. We'll have him work with Lair for an hour. Then we'll take him to his birthday party. So he had normalcy, but it was very, very structured. As far as I knew what he was doing every day, and plus, got to that point with the other guinea pigs as well. So I'll tell you very quickly, Jim Verdick, I picked him up, and he came to visit Tyler, Texas, and Clayton lived right by the college. And I said, "Hey, coach, let's I told this young boy's parents that we'll come by and watch him hit the backboard." And it just worked out where Clayton's tennis bag was in his mother's car, and the car wasn't there, so there's no rackets. And so, Jim Verdick's always got a stopwatch, and it just was in his, Clayton's neighborhood. And he said, "Okay, let's mark it off from this tree to this tree, and then from this tree to this tree." And they had a little incline up the driveway, and coach was going, "This is so great. And, let's do it backwards." And so in that sense, what an education he had. But with David Stanley, so my first weekend at Tyler Junior College, and the goal is to set up this tennis teaching program. David Stanley's whacking again. He has a ball machine, and he has no idea how to hit a tennis ball. And I'm out there helping kids out. And I said, hey, if you want any pointers, I'd be happy to help you. And then he said, really what I want is I want help for my son. And so I started there. I can go back, 81. He was born in 74. He has an October birthday. So it was, he was a very, very young kid. And his father said, I really wanted to be a good tennis player. So he became a good tennis player. So he was the first guinea pig. And, we had all sorts of critics on the local scene. And there's nothing better than winning in one sense. I mean, because people don't listen to science, logic, or imagery. And then the guinea pigs that we had became very good players. But I remember that story where you went to.
Well, one of the guys that I worked for here in Canada for his team, the Western Hockey League. It's the league before the NHL, where the 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds play, and then they make the jump to the NHL. And his name is Curtis Hunt. And Curtis always talks about there's two types of players. There's campers and there's climbers. And Clayton Stanley was a climber. And as you know, there's way too many campers in the tennis world. So
how would you define how would you define those two? Just for our listeners, camper and climber.
A camper is he just does enough to get by, and he makes routine decisions every day. And a climber is one that has a resilient mindset. Adapts to different situations, expects to be pushed hard, relentless motor, and makes better plays. And the difference between a camper and climber is massive. The campers are the ones that they've got the excuses, and the climbers going, "Why didn't you tell me that before?" It's so easy working with climbers, and it's so hard working with campers. So
no, it's well put. Tennis in Finland. I know hockey in Finland. You went to Finland. I've only been there one time. It was a very short visit. Beautiful place. Certainly, I've met a lot of Finnish tennis players. But tell us a little bit about your experience in Finland.
Finland was cool. I went there and I had a dual setup. I was going to play hockey in the at that time the third division in hockey. And that worked out pretty good. Got my first concussion there. Got nailed. Got bullnosed by a guy. Played well. My playing level was good there. I couldn't skate as a player. That was my greatest weakness. Learned to skate better in Finland, but not as good as I should have been. And then with the Finnish Tennis Federation, I got into the streamline of their Federation Cup. I worked with two girls, Nana and Petra, who ended up being both top 100 players in the world. Traveled with them to Wimbledon, Roland Garros, Spain. They were playing for the Finnish national team, went all over the place, and really got integrated into elite tennis and what it does, what you have to do with elite players, which is a little bit more different than with hacks and low performance kids, but seeing the work ethic and what a high performance athlete really wants, it was really fun, and I really enjoyed it. Thinking about Finland, I left after it was close to 2 years, but the winters were too long, and you're just so far away from everything. So then from there, I decided to go back to Germany. It was a great experience. Like, one of the best things, Nana was playing Steffi Graf, and you go out and then you get looked right in the eye like, what do I do to beat her? And I'm going like, how about let's just try to get to 3 sets, and Nana was a short, stubby fire hydrant, couldn't run very hard to get on the ball, but she never got to 3 sets with Steffi Graf. So it was the lack of her coach's ability to come up with game plan, I guess.
Steffi Graf, I mean, she was so great. But just to be on the court with Steffi Graf is a statement itself. That means obviously you're a very, very good tennis player. How about the ice hockey? I know my brother, maybe his biggest claim to fame is he drafted Timo Solani. What was hockey like in Finland compared to Canada?
Hockey was good. At the time, one of my best friends from Canada was playing in the first league, finished first league as a foreigner. He was a big star, so I could skate with them, and that was fun too. It's just a different culture of playing. Just like in Canada here, hockey's important. And what I remember was at the time, again, it's like 87 or whatever it is, or 86 or whatever. But the speed was impressive. And in looking back at video now from 1986, from the best players in the NHL, they were so slow, even in 1986. So I can't imagine how slow I was. But it was. I like traveling. I like going to different places. I don't like sitting around doing the same thing too much. So I want to go out and experience stuff. And Finland was a nice little departure of going to see a different place.
With so many different things come to my mind. With hockey now, tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, hockey now, I'm dabbling right now. So, I work with an agent, and we call ourselves 10X Hockey, and we're basically trying to fill a gap in the system of doing video evaluation for high performance players. We do video breakdowns of game scenarios and their patterns, trying to enhance their hockey IQ by telling them the truth. And right now in Canadian hockey, there's very many skilled coaches who teach you how to shoot, skate, pass, and do that. And these guys are doing fantastic jobs. And they're very well educated. And then the coaches who run the teams are usually amateur guys. They got a real job doing something else and are part-time coaches. And their education is, let's say, less enhanced. So the gap between the skilled coaches and these head coaches is large. So I'm trying to fill the niche right now of telling the kids the truth. Like most head coaches are just recruiters. They recruit a kid, try to get them on their team. So I'm trying to help kids getting better faster, stealing terms of system within a system, and that's working really, really well. And that's led to me scouting. I was scouting as a special consultant with the NHL for the NHL entry draft that's coming up in 2 weeks, where the top 18-year-olds in the world get drafted by the NHL teams. I'm working right now with a team in Italy as their scouting consultant for them to fill out their roster of foreign players. Just this morning, I closed another deal with another German team to do the same thing. I've been working the Western Hockey League as a head scout of evaluating 14-year-old and 15-year-old players to see if they have what it takes to be in the best junior hockey league in the world. So I got my fingers in a lot of pies, trying to make a mark and use my knowledge of hockey and coaching and helping people getting better,
And tell us about the parallel. I mean, all the time that you studied tennis, I mean, what's similar? I mean, how's it helping you out? What's different?
Well, the thing is that what you always used to talk to us about was having an eye, like really watching stroke production. And by no means am I a tennis technician. I'm better than most, but there's a handful of my friends that are much better. But of understanding technique, of understanding how the game is played, from seeing that in tennis and taking that to my background in hockey, it's been really, really simple. Like I can watch a video of a player for 25, 30 seconds and basically can drill down what he does well, what he does poorly, and what the next steps are. And I found I could do that in tennis as well. Sometimes I wouldn't have the patience to do the work, the long-term nuts and bolts work. But in hockey, it's a little bit easier. The skill level of the hockey player compared to the tennis player is the skilled player in hockey. He wants to learn to skate better, and he wants to shoot better, and he wants to play better. He wants information. And in tennis, as you know, sometimes those people don't want information. They want to pat them back. They want to get a good sweat, and they think it's sweat. Activity equals achievement, which is not right. But in hockey, players want to grow their toolbox and get better. And I always talk to players about having multiple layers to their game. They have layers right now, but to make money in the game, to be on TV, you've got to have multiple layers. And so I'm talking about players of adding this or adding that. Don't take away what you're doing now, but adding and constantly getting better, And in hockey right now, what I'm doing, it works. People are listening to me and things are going good. So I'm really happy with it.
10X hockey. Well, for our listeners, you've spent your way to the grocery store. You never left hockey, but your way to the grocery store forever was really, or for the longest time, decades, was tennis. These handouts you have, the language is so much the same from one sport to the next. But why don't you talk about this a little bit? To me, I have 3 older brothers. It wasn't really fair for girls when I was a young kid growing up. The privileges or the opportunities they had for sport. But I can remember my 3 older brothers, they didn't work with figure skaters. They didn't work with power skating. To me, it's like everybody in the NHL now can absolutely fly compared to years ago. But I think that the tennis players, it's amazing to me that pro players, for example, they don't have patterns. Some of them don't have patterns where, okay, don't you occasionally serve and volley? Or can you play doubles where you could serve and go forward? I understand that the game itself of hockey, you're going to go to the net. That's the only way you can score. The offensive players have to, especially defensive players too, but more so the offensive players drive to the net. But why don't you expand upon that a little bit? Where, what are your thoughts? Where, pro tennis, it has improved, and it always will at that very elite level. Always the best are going to be impressive, but at the lower levels, to me, it's just the game of tennis is not played at a very high level.
Yeah, well, that's the dichotomy as well here too. I see all these kids, and they're I hate the word high performance, but they're the ones who got a chance of playing junior hockey or college hockey, and then from there, pro hockey. But the game is, from the skill level, has never been better. But the way the kids play the game is absolute dog shit. And what hockey is a game of chaos. However, there's frequency of actions that always happen. And what I've done is identified these high frequent events and have basically understood and are now giving that information that there's no difference, and we always talk about that in an approach shot in tennis. There's really no defense. The whole thing of in the approach shot, go to the net, drop your racket, and you win 50% of the points. And in hockey, it's the same way. Run this route, do this play, and even though the other team knows that it's coming, there's no defense to it. And so I talk about frequency of events. I talk about impact events, just like in tennis. Like you said, like you get a short ball, why are you not going to the net? You're going to win if you're advancing to the net. If you can get a first volley in the court, you're going to win 65, 70%, which averages out to winning 0-0. And in hockey, it's the same thing. You know, if you go to certain areas of the ice, I call it the graveyard now. If you go to this area in the ice, you are in the graveyard. And it's not going to work. But if you go to this zone, I call it the event zone. And in the event zone, you can make a cognitive decision of what's next. And what's next is going to be an individual play that leads to a team play. And it works. And so I just talked to a kid earlier this morning who's playing in a very high league here. And I said to him, when you go over the blue line into the offensive zone, what is your plan? Give me 2 sentences of normal English. What is your plan? And this kid's 19 years old, and he's one step away from pro hockey. And he says to me, he goes, I don't have a clue. And I love it because then I can help that guy. And he's willing to listen. And he wants ideas. He wants feedback where, you know, it's another thing. Hockey players want feedback. And they understand that feedback is not always a pat on the back. And, you know, their expectations are aligned with the coaches. And that, you know, it's just a lot easier. Like I found the last couple of years coaching tennis was really difficult. And the first couple of years of doing what I'm doing now here in hockey is really easy. The players are much more accepting, and they want to accept. And
with from this handout attitude, I'll just read a few. I love this one. Understand that old habits will never bring new results. If hockey is a priority, you'll find a way. If it's not, you'll find an excuse. Never be comfortable. Everything you want is on the other side of being uncomfortable. It's never the wrong time to do the right thing. You know, those are just very powerful mind vitamins. With a pat on the back is only 3.
Yeah, the last one.
Go ahead.
The last one I must have said to my daughter 1,000 times. Never the wrong time to do the right thing. You know.
Yeah. A pat on the back is only 3.
It's more important to watch.
I'm sorry again.
I always say there's more important to watch 15 minutes of TV or hit 15 minutes of balls. You know. Well.
Yeah. You know, and you can find those 15 minutes on a daily basis. I like this one. A pat on the back is only 3 feet away from the kick in the ass. That ratio is so out of whack in tennis. The other thing, too, we tell people that you're just 4 inches away from being a great player, and that's the distance between your left ear and your right ear. With
yeah.
In my thoughts, if you can't skate, you can't play. And, you know, we always know that there's a few people that aren't the best skaters that go to a real high level. I mean, yourself, you picked on yourself about not being a great skater, but you were a goalie for a long time. I remember always people saying that Jacques Plante was a fantastic skater. But in tennis, you would think the same thing. You know, if you don't have strokes, you can't be a player. We do know that up to a certain level, and even all the, you know, you think of Pepe Merlo going way back, or what was the magician from France, Santoro? What was his name? Fantastic player. I think he had
Fabrice Santoro. Yeah,
Fabrice Santoro is that he. I think he has wins over 18 players who rank number 1. And I think Federer used to play his best tennis against Santoro because he used to hit a slice forehand, and Federer would just attack. He wasn't staying back and rallying with any trickery. He would just force. Shyness is a fear. For our listeners, Jim Rogers is not shy. I think about a time where you asked me, you're a young guy, and you asked me if I would be on a coast-to-coast radio show with you two in Canada. We were interviewed on the radio. Why don't you talk a little bit about shyness? Don't you think a lot of times people are just too afraid to put their hand up?
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's. I was just talking to my friend this morning, a hockey agent. I said to him, if you want to help people, tell them the truth. If you want to help yourself, tell people what they want to hear. And I said, number one, helping people, tell them the truth. I've got that one down. But to help myself and tell people what they want to hear, I can't do that. In today's day and age, they call that a soft skill. So I think it's a lot better to stand up than to blend in. No one likes vanilla. Be strawberry, be chocolate. Do something. You know what I mean? And everyone's going to have haters. And I don't give about the 50% that hate me. The 50% of the people that like me. Oh, I like hanging with those people. So, in sport here, you don't have to be an idiot about it or anything, but of going your own way, of having a plan, standing by your plan, and saying this is what I stand for, is really important. I see that when I'm in scouting meetings. I'll see scouting guys and they go, well, Steve Smith, he's a good kid, works hard, good parent. Then they'll ask me about that player, and I'll go, he's terrible. Like, I'm not putting my name beside that player. And it's so hard for people to do that. And I think it's gotten away from the sports society of that. Everyone gets a trophy, everyone gets a pat on the back. If you want to get to the highest, I think if you want to be Sidney Crosby, or if you want to be Dennis Shapovalov, or you want to be Rory McIlroy, you've got to do things that no one else is going to do. You got to eat for a little bit, and people aren't willing to do that. And even the coaches who are working with them, they're willing to tell the people the truth. And if you have an elite athlete, they want to hear that. Elite athletes don't want to hear fluff. They want just the facts of, how do I get better? Or are you going to help me get better? And I really like that concept, and of being shy or not, but it's standing by what you do. Just looking what you do. You're trying to improve tennis across the world for 40 years, and it's hard, but you're still doing it, and good on you. Yeah.
Well,
being shy is.
Go ahead.
Being shy is not an option.
Shyness
it's not a strategy.
Shyness is a fear. Those are all great golden nuggets for the tennis treasure chest. Here's a story with Jim Rogers putting his hand up. This is my recollection. Let me tell the story quickly, and then you can add to it. So you're in Saskatchewan. You fly from Saskatoon to Edmonton to Calgary. You rent a car. You check into a hotel, and you're going to a coach's workshop. You walk in, and Louis Caillé, who's now with LTA, and he's highly regarded as a double specialist. But at that time, he was with Tennis Canada, and it was the action method. And you come in a little bit late because of your travel, and they're watching a tape on Nick Bollettieri, the late Bollettieri, I believe was on the serve. And, Nick would be the first one to say that, he was not the technical guru, although certainly respects so much of what he did. With you raise your hand, and Louis Caillé says, yes. And your question was, how long are we going to watch that tape? That tape cost $29. Chirping. I guess if you could define chirping, I don't think chirping really exists in tennis, but it does in hockey. I think growing up in the locker room, I think that's something that you could share with the students. Something there, I should say, the audience, the listeners.
Chirping,
How do you find chirping,
yeah,
and what do you think?
chirping is an art form, and the best chirps are towards people you love the most. So it's really hard to chirp somebody that you dislike. So the more direct and more intensive the chirp basically means the more you love the guy. I was just at a golf tournament the other day, my team against another team, and they gave me one of their better players, and my team captain says to me, "This guy's going to chirp you," and I go, "I'm not too concerned." And after 2 or 3 holes, the guy starts chirping, and I go, "Dude, just shut up! I'm going to beat your ass." And golf players are also soft characters, and he's never had someone talk to him. It turns out he's a millionaire real estate guy, and he folded like a bag of chips. So chirping is telling someone what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear. So it's an affectionate love form, I call it.
No, that's great. It's an art form, a love form. But I think that there's a much better BS detector in hockey, in the hockey scene, the hockey world, than there is in tennis. What do you think?
Absolutely. Well, I think you said this years ago. When you look at tennis technique or hockey technique, I think you refer to it when you throw someone in a swimming pool that can't swim, you go, he cannot swim. But you throw another guy in there who can swim, you can tell. You can swim or you can't swim. And it's the same with skating. You can see it, he can skate or he can't skate. But in tennis, no one says that. It's like, well, he's got his own personal style, but he can't swim. And as you know, so many people are drowning in tennis. And it goes back to the accountability of the coaching. We grind and we're all first base coaches, some are second base coaches, but, following a family tree of coaching, of just saying, like, this kid started with you at 5 years old, he's playing club tennis, and he's 55 years old now, or 40 years old, or whatever, of identifying through, can people play the game? Are they not drowning? That's so positive. Like I know I've got a group of 30 or 40 guys in Germany. They started as kids, and they're all ballers today. And Richard has that in Toronto, and you have that across the world. But the accountability of coaching is so bad. And as you said a thousand times, the tennis consumer is the dumbest person on the face of the planet. They give money and there's no accountability. And it comes to chirping. Like I would love to chirp all these tennis coaches here, but 1, I don't love them, and 2, I don't respect them, and 3, there's no accountability for it. So it's just a vicious circle that I know you're fighting the good fight, and good on you, but it's such a brutal battle, eh?
Let's end up with good old beer. The listeners, young Jim Rogers, think about this. He's 10 years younger than I am. I started this program, I'm 26, so maybe he shows up, I'm 29, he's 19. And I would show up at my apartment, and Rogers, I would open the door. If hockey was on, he was in my apartment. And Tyler, Texas, in Smith County, they certainly didn't name it after me. And it was a dry county where you couldn't, there was, like, the beer trucks would go to the restaurants in Tyler, but they would have these white flaps, so you wouldn't see like a Budweiser truck drive by. So it was a different place when it came down to the liquor laws. But I remember telling Rogers, I said, no, you can come over and watch hockey anytime you want, but it just isn't going to work. I'll lose my job in this small town if I'm drinking beer with you. But you had such great passion. But I do remember, this is a fun story. And when I grew up in ice hockey, college hockey, there was beer on the bus. If people were watching the movie Miracle on Ice, the coaches were drinking with the players. So, I mean, times have changed. And now, even way back when, my brother was a assistant coach with the Rangers, they'd have like a 2-hour practice, and some of them would be at a bar where, it'd be a restaurant as well, and they would have lunch and dinner, and they would just close the bar. But I would say that, even tennis players years ago, and I know now there's so much pounding on the hard courts and the ball is traveling faster because of the rackets. But I would say that players today are fitter. The nutrition, the understanding of exercise, isometrics, to weightlifting, to this, to that, the other thing. But the character, maybe even perhaps in ice hockey, it's getting softer than it was years ago. But I can remember, Rogers, you go on an interview, the people call me up and they loved you. They said, this guy, he got in the men's doubles and he was a star, and he was teaching beginners, he was teaching tots. They had you in for a long weekend interview, and they only had one concern, is that they took you out the last day for dinner, and they thought you drank too many beers. So we do have that. We had the Jim Rogers rule that we learned from you, that on the interview, instead of having 22 beers, never have more than 2.
Exactly.
You remember that
well,
story?
I got stories from all that. I remember going over to your place and watching the games, and because you were so wealthy back then, all you had in your fridge was white bread and tuna fish.
Oh, wow.
And I had never had white bread and tuna fish before, and then you turned me on to tuna fish sandwiches with lettuce and mayonnaise. So I remember going over your place, always eating that. And then I can't remember the little lady, but she was a little short German lady.
Helene Hudnall.
And Helene Hudnall, right. And we knew we were all going over to Germany, so she's trying her really hardest to teach us German. And she was a fantastic lady. And she taught me, ich möchte 2 Bier haben, which is, I would like to have 2 beers, please. And she always asked me, she goes, why are you ordering 2 beers? I go, well, if I can get the 2 beers, I don't have to order again. So we had a laugh at that. I remember that. So, so the moral of the story is, again, never the wrong time to do the right thing. And that's how I try to live my life and teach my daughter and have my wife do that. And with the coaching tennis, which was a great vehicle for me, and now the hockey gig, it's another great vehicle for me. And it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. And that's my parting shot. How's that?
You're awesome, Rogers. It's good to hear your voice. Good to talk to you. I do think that I go down the road, and I'm grateful that I think of myself more as having hockey DNA, and that's helped me in tennis. And I think you would think the same thing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The thing that I laugh about myself is obviously the older you get, the more you think you know. But I'm just loving the hockey thing right now, because I do know a lot, and I'm an expert, right? But every day when I watch more film every day, I'm going like, how about that? That's fantastic. I didn't know that. I'm going to incorporate that. I found a coach here who happens to be German, a German hockey coach. And without knowing his background, without knowing my background, we're clicking. And just on concepts of coaching, concepts of style of play, of what's important. And it's very rare. And he just said to me the other day, he goes, he can't talk to Canadian coaches because they think so differently. And I think that's what I do very well, is think differently. And this part of meeting you and the tennis thing, because we were, or still are, outcasts. We're not insiders, we're outsiders. And the ability to think independently, the ability to express yourself the way that you find it's important, and not go with the flow or not go with the sheep, it's incredibly important. And yeah, there you go.
All right, Jimbo, thank you very much. You're going to go hit some tennis balls.
Yeah, you got to come out to Vancouver and I'll in October, and open invitation, and come help me watch some hockey players play some hockey. Then we'll watch that, and we'll feel happy, and then we'll go to some tennis centers, and I'll make you feel sad. So.
Oh, that's great. Well, for our listeners, I understand you're going to go play tennis right now. That's a big plus. Thanks for the invitation. I'd love to come out. And I think I still think I have an eye. I think I would be able to pick out, who's a pretty good player and who's not so good and why. But no, certainly, obviously, there's so much to learn. But once you have an eye for it, you have an eye for it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. But Jimbo, thank you so much. It was fun to talk to you.
All right, Stevie. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Adios.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. All right. GreatBase Tennis Podcast, Jim Rogers. There's so many pearls of wisdom, some great mind vitamins, the golden nuggets. But anyway, thanks for listening, Jim Rogers. Thank you. 150, 152, whatever we are, we're in the books and we're going forward. Thanks.